everyone, and welcome back to the series called Anxiety Reduction via Self-Regulation. I'm your host, Sarah McKelvey. In today's video, we're going to be learning how to utilize spiritual practices in our efforts towards staying self-regulated. Practices like deep breathing, tuning in, taking a mindful pause to drink a cup of tea and reflect. And in this mode, we receive the most delightful messages like this one. I'm supposed to be kind to myself today. Practices that help us center, stabilize our attention, and investigate the mental patterns that we have can help us in that effort to regulate the intensity of our inner lives with its accompanying urges to react. I've identified 6 spiritual practices that really are ideal vehicles to practice self-regulation, and we really need practice to train ourselves in how to do this. The most logical choice of an initial spiritual practice to introduce is, of course, meditation practice. Meditation practice really helps us with top-down management, right? Using the mind to influence both the mind and the body. It has a trickle-down effect on the body and then our behavior. It's said that meditation can help us mediate rumination, improve our ability to manage our emotions, and increase self-compassion. A meditation teacher I really respect, Tara Brach, describes meditation as a process that helps us learn to be awake, present, and open-hearted in everything we do. And I thought that description really is a nice one to describe a regulated state, right? A regulated approach to dealing with things. Awake, present, and open-hearted rather than impulsive and reactive. The process itself, meditation there are many ways to meditate, but if I boil it down, the procedure itself of meditating is itself self-regulating, and it's just an ideal training grounds to work with inner life and your mind and mental patterns such that, when you are triggered out there in the world, that you have, sort of you've already practiced this in kind of a pristine condition. When we become conscious of our mental patterns, by, a simple cycle, if I describe it in meditation, of noticing what's happening for us internally and not needing to necessarily do anything with it, pausing, reflecting on it, observing it, then we can start practice gently letting go of it, or at least not indulging what we're thinking about. That's an incredible capacity of having some control of your own mind. Most of us feel completely out of control regarding our reactions, and this process helps to start influencing our mental life and having some ability to choose what we are going to persist in thinking about or not. Why I think that's particularly relevant to self-regulation is that when we have an undisciplined mind, a mind not disciplined into practices such as meditation, our thought-feeling stream can quickly get out of control. It can quickly strengthen, compound, and become kind of like a hurricane of the mind, which is related to intense anxiety, even panic attacks, and also like depressive gloominess. When we don't have an ability to shape our mental life, it can quickly develop into these sort of full-blown very emotion-laden situations that are really intense to deal with. If you're a beginner and don't really know where to start in meditation, or you want to, you've been curious about it but haven't been able to implement a habit in your life, there's a really simple and straightforward article published recently, I think 2020, in the New York Times, simply called How to Meditate. It's linked on my website as a resource, and I'll link it down in the description box below. It's full of nice descriptions of how to do it, ideas for practice, as well as guided meditations for free that you can listen to. The second spiritual practice for self-regulation that I want to recommend is the practice of yoga. Yoga, I feel, is the mind-body practice par excellence. I think it has equal benefits for our physical health as well as our mental health. It is widely available and fairly accessible. It really helps in the practice itself. There's a lot of opportunity for practicing self-regulation. For example, in many classes, we're taught to hold the discomfort in a pose rather than quickly escape it or resist the kind of pain that we feel in our body, the kind of reactivity that we can experience that wants us to end the discomfort. We actually work with that in yoga a lot, along with many other ways that we work with our mind as we're going through this movement practice. Movement practices that bring consciousness raising into the mix can really help establish that connection with oneself that's really needed in order to function effectively in the world. I want to mention too something within the yoga tradition that I have practiced myself, which I find particularly useful when in high levels of distress, and these are yoga inversions. So an inversion is where your head is beneath your heart. And some of these inversions activate the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system. I particularly like a pose called legs up the wall when under high levels of distress. I have recommended it. Our third spiritual practice is using mantras, music, and particularly sound healing in our efforts to regulate, particularly if we want to calm down, which is one function of self-regulation. A mantra is a word or a sound repeated to aid in concentration and meditation, and can really function, all of these sound healing mantra and types of music, cleanse the mind in a really wonderful way, especially when we repeat something over and over. It really breaks up the mind's capacity to ruminate, and so helps us with sort of like a mental bath. And we all need a break from a lot of congested, intense thinking from time to time. In addition, a mantra can be seen as an intention or a prayer, and so it can also be nice to help us live deliberately, as well as help us to stay self-regulated. An example of a mantra that we might use, many times Sanskrit mantras are used, this really old language encoding different kinds of maybe like we might call it spiritual promises and hope for ourselves and others in achieving virtues like open-heartedness, wakefulness, and presence, if we reference back to Tara Brach. But you could also use mantras like, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, or everything's going to be okay, everything is going to be okay, depending on the kind of energy and mindset that you need in any given situation. Chanting, relatedly, because it's repetitive, can help quiet and cleanse the mind. And certain sounds really kind of help us with brainwave activation, that when you sync up in a group and your brain waves coordinate because our nervous systems are open, it can be really calming and instill a real deep sense of belonging to do this with others. The last three spiritual practices I'm going to recommend are really drawn from personal experience. I've really explored these quite extensively and really want to offer them as really useful tools of spiritual practice that can also help you stay psychologically healthy and self-regulated. The first is immersing yourself in nature. Immersing myself in nature has had a profound effect on me over the years. I tend to prefer it. It's sort of my natural habitat. And you can't not be regulated in nature. It has a strong effect on our nervous system. So even if you're not consciously practicing in nature, which I also recommend that you do, nature will sort of take over and kind of relieve you of errant energies or excessive overthinking. It really just relaxes us into a much more sane self-organization. So get yourself out in nature and really absorb the sensory environment, the energies of the earth and of natural settings. The U.S. National Park Service reports that 5 minutes of walking in nature improves mood, self-esteem, and relaxation. Frequent exposure to nature reduces anxiety and depression while promoting well-being and fulfillment. Physical activity in a green space can reduce stress and lower cortisol levels by 15%. So, the science backs the spiritual practice of being in nature. And really, you can appropriate it as a spiritual practice, especially with kind of entering it from a place of the sacred, respecting and honoring, from that kind of awe-inspired place. Spiritual practice really has to do with that reverence. It has a lot to do with this certain kind of attitude we take into our activities. So one can be in nature in kind of an athletic way, or one can be in nature in a contemplative way. Both are great, and I think being in nature contemplatively can be a part of your repertoire to help you stay self-regulated and reap immense benefits from doing so. The fifth spiritual practice that I recommend is reading spiritual literature, or spiritual self-help, as it's called. Wayne Dyer once taught me that you can find spiritual solutions to your life's problems. And this is indeed true. A lot of spiritual literature can be uplifting, can instill hope, can offer reframes to people who are struggling or suffering, and just help cope better in life with positive outlooks and ways of dealing with your tricky life situations. The last spiritual practice that I would highly recommend is that you start journaling. I myself have taken journaling quite far in my personal life, and it really does. Certain ways of journaling can help us enter into frustrations, fears, concerns, problems, and help us kind of map out what's happening. And then after sort of mapping it out and expressing your true feelings and thoughts without reserve, there's kind of a natural thing that kicks in terms of wanting to work our way through what we are exploring therein. There is a difference between nervous system regulation and self-regulation. They're very related, but I think it's worth saying that we can go through states of nervous system regulation to dysregulation. And that's normal, and we're going to move back and forth between those polarities, the stress response and having a neutral response. So our ability to self-regulate can help us achieve more states of nervous system regulation. We can have more influence over that volatility and variability if we have a practice of self-regulation. If we know how to self-regulate, we should expect reasonably that our nervous system regulation is going to be more frequent. We're going to live in nervous system regulation more often. We're going to creatively end this video, and what we're going to do is enter a artful and embodied depiction of someone demonstrating these practices that we've discussed here on this video. She's going to demonstrate ways she's using her spiritual resources to deal with intensity and inner confusion in a mindful effort to self-guide, to help herself. See if you can pick out what techniques she might be employing. See what she might be experiencing as you watch her engage these spiritual practices to reduce anxiety and achieve self-regulation. And don't forget to tune in to our next topic on self-regulation, which is using co-regulation to self-regulate.